All right, how we doing, everybody? Welcome back to Real Estate Bites. This is episode 109, coming at you most Fridays here at the lunch hour, giving you something to chew on through the weekend as regards to the real estate industry. So the topic of today is appraisals. There are major changes coming to the world of appraisals that may affect deals, may affect sellers, buyers, and agents, of course. And we're going to talk about that because it could be a big deal. Before we get into that, though, I want to take a little bit of a detour here to talk about something that happened recently in the political realm that is, it doesn't sit well with me. And that is Representative Max Miller, resident of Bay Village, and representative of the 7th Congressional District in the state of Ohio, has requested that the White House send the National Guard to the city of Cleveland to begin to police its streets. I think this is a terrible move. I do not believe that we need martial law in a police state here in the state of Ohio, especially not here in the city of Cleveland. You've got the city police, you've got the sheriff's department, you have multiple other law enforcement agencies that operate inside the city of Cleveland. We do not need the feds policing our streets. That's my opinion and my opinion alone. I don't represent anybody else. Would love to know what you folks out there think about this call for the feds to come in, for the National Guard to come in and police the city streets. I've already reached out to my congressional representative, Bob Latta, and I've told him my opinion. If you have an opinion that's strong enough that you want to share, well, let me show you who to get a hold of. All right. So let me share this screen real quick. Right here are the congressional maps. Okay. The congressional map, the congressional districts in the state. Right here is where Representative or Congressman Miller represents, this little swath of western Cuyahoga, Medina, Wayne County, northern Holmes County, calling for the National Guard to come into a district he does not represent. His reasoning was that the people in his suburbs are scared to go to Cleveland. Okay, whatever. Anyways, there's the congressional district map. All right. Here's a little list you can find on govtrack.us. Congress members, shows you who your congressman is that you would need to reach out to talk to. All right, enough of that. So, appraisals. All right, team. Since 2018, Fannie Mae has been working on revamping the appraisal reporting system. Let me get you a little context. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are the secondary market for mortgages, right? When you go to your lender, broker, bank, whomever, and they underwrite or they originate a loan and then underwrite the loan, most often they're trying to sell that loan to Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac so that they can, again, once they sell it, now they can lend again, right? If they fill up their books with loans, then at some point in time, they no longer can lend out money based upon fractional reserve lending, right? So in order to continue to write and originate loans, these banks and mortgage brokers have to sell those products to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac on the secondary market so that it frees up more money in their fractional lending system so that they can go and originate more loans. Now, once Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac has purchased the loan, they then package those loans into what's called a mortgage-backed security, and they sell them to investors on Wall Street. And that was the loosey-goosey execution of that was what led to the global financial meltdown in 2008, 2009. Okay, nevertheless, I say all that because that secondary mortgage industry is a $12 trillion industry, and Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac are providing liquidity to all the banks and brokers out there so that they can continue to originate home loans for would-be buyers. And because they're taking on all of that risk, they ultimately write the rules for the appraisal, how appraisers operate, what they're looking for, what they're reporting, what the reports look like. So that is why Fannie Mae is the entity who's been working on this new appraisal reporting system now for the past 7 years, and they finally got something put together. I want to show you guys something real quick. They just came out last month with their new seller's guide. The seller guide from Fannie Mae is the rule book for appraisers. And in doing my bit of research here for today's program, I looked up the selling guide and I was going to research out of it. I chose not to because look at this guy, 1,183 pages of rules for appraisers. Guys, the table of contents is 10 pages long. I mean, and this is an 1,183 page document for single families, okay? Not multifamily, not, I mean, wow, right? So at any rate, I know that there are some masochists out there who are going to read all 1,183 pages, and I will likely refer to pages to get some education. And listen, man, I love reading. I do. I've always got a book or two open. I'm not reading 1,183 pages of the Fannie Mae Selling Guide. That just sounds like it sounds like the ninth circle of hell is what it sounds like. So at any rate, that's the selling guide that generates the rules for appraisers when they go to do their thing. So what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have done is they've teamed up and they've created a brand new appraisal reporting system, out with the old, in with the new. The new is called the UAD 3.6. That stands for the Uniform Appraisal Data Set 3.6. And inside of that data set, they have a bunch of new rules, a whole new reporting system. And so I'll read to you, sort of in a nutshell, what the intent is and how it's going to work. I'm quoting from a presentation, an hour-long presentation that I watched earlier preparing for this. They said, this came from Fannie Mae, by the way, this is new information will be added, reducing free-form comments, eliminating non-relevant fields, and capturing discrete information with less free-form entry. The lender gets a well-organized report plus machine-readable data and uses both to help mitigate risk and streamline processes. Okay. Furthermore, it will apply appraisal data and rules engines to identify red flags. So let me unpack that a little bit and what they're saying here. So in the old appraisal forms, you would have, they record basic public data, and then they have a comp set, right, where they, and then there's a lot of where they call free form entry. And that is basically a narrative that's written by the appraiser to explain how they came up with value. Now, what they're doing in this new one is they're eliminating a lot of the space for free form entry. Now, here's the thing. Yes and no. What they've really done is they've added a lot more fields for specific data points to be entered. And some of them are relatively strict. And I'm going to talk about one of them that is going to have an impact on valuations here in the greater Cleveland area. It's going to have an impact nationwide, but we're talking about the greater Cleveland area that we don't want to become a police state, by the way. So anyways, so there's a lot more data points that are going to need to be entered in, right? Now, once they enter in data points, there is a ton of spaces where the appraiser can go ahead and put in commentary about what they see. So I was looking at an example of this new, what a new appraisal is going to look like, and they put in there, and one of the spots that they put in for an example was, the oven was functional, but it was not new, and by today's standards is outdated. So let me circle back to that. Remember that as the oven comment. And let me circle back to that and finish this, right? New information will be added. These are all the new data points that are going to be required by appraisers to put in, okay? In capturing discrete information. The discrete information is the new sections where appraisers can put their own subjective interpretations of what they're looking at inside this digital data entry form, right? The lender gets a well-organized report plus machine-readable data. Machine-readable data, combine that with apply appraisal data and rules engines to identify red flags. what that tells me is they're going to be using AI to do a lot of the analysis on these properties. They're going to be using AI to generate um, valuations for us. And that's not necessarily bad. None of this is necessarily bad. I'm neither for or against what's going on here. I just want to bring to attention to the marketplace that things are going to change. There's going to be a bit of a learning curve. And in the meantime, it could really affect deals. I'm going to get to that here in just a bit. But they're going to use AI. How is AI going to look for keywords inside of its algorithms and apply those to valuation? So if an appraiser makes a comment about an oven, which isn't really a part of the house, I mean, I guess if it's built in, right? You see those built-ins that are double or whatever, but that can all be changed. It's not really a part of the structure. It's not really a part of the house. It is a fixture attached to the house. Um, but based upon the appraiser and how old they are, where they grew up, the amount of affluence they're used to or not, um, talking about an oven and whether or not it's out of date and worth less, I mean, that is a completely subjective opinion. How is AI going to take keywords from that subjective opinion and apply it to valuation? That's a concern for me. Okay. So now let me talk into how it's going to affect valuations here locally and where it's going to cause headaches. There's a couple data points in there that are very strict and have been so the data points are written by ANSI. Okay, so ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, they have written the guide on what is considered square footage in a home and other measurements of a home, right? And some of those some of those points and rules that ANSI has created, they've kind of gone ignored, right? And I'm going to talk about one specifically right here that'll explain what I'm talking about. So, here in the greater Cleveland area, there's every community just about has bungalows, Cape Cods that were built in the 50s, 60s, 40, 50, 60s, right? Some communities more than others have a bunch of them. City of Lorraine, the cities of Parma, Parma Heights, Cleveland proper, there's a lot of bungalows and smaller Cape Cods throughout Northeast Ohio and the country, of course. So this specific data point is going to be throwing people for a loop in a big way because now appraisers are forced to take these measurements and plug them into this new UAD 3.6 system, and the algorithm is then going to generate a valuation based on this. So listen up. When you go up into the top story of a bungalow, right? You oftentimes see knee walls. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about if you're not quite certain. Um, and this is what I'm talking about. So this is the knee wall here, right? You have it comes straight up 90 degrees from the floor, and then there's a bend like a knee at some point in the wall. And sometimes it happens real low in the wall, sometimes it happens high up in the wall, and then the ceiling slopes up to a high point. That's a knee wall. And you see this a lot in bungalows. You can see here, they've created what looks like a pretty spacious full bath that contains a knee wall in the second story of a bungalow. So here's where things get tricky. This is going to be a big change that's coming up soon. Okay. And that is this 50% of a room's finished square foot must have ceilings 7 foot or taller. 50%. So let's go back to that image I just showed you. If you have a small bungalow with a small upstairs and you have very angled slopes, right? Let's say it's short to get. Let's say the very highest point of the ceiling is 7 foot, and that happens. It happens somewhat frequently, even 7.5 foot. The very highest point of the ceiling in your bungalow with knee walls on the second floor is only 7 foot. Well, if this knee wall starts at say 3 feet or 4 feet, that slope continues. None of that, they're saying, you got to have 50% of the room with at least 7 foot or higher. And if you've only got a small strip or down the middle of the room that is at 7 feet, that might mean that most of that room is not at 7 foot. That might mean if you have less than 50% of the square footage with 7 foot above it with ceilings, they don't include that as square footage at all, regardless of what size bed you got in there, how many kids are sleeping up there, or your guest room. If you got a full bath belt like this picture does here, they will not count that square footage in the house. You lose that square footage when it comes to your valuation. All right. That's a big deal. That is a big deal for all of these communities that have smaller bungalows with second floor that have knee walls and slope ceilings. So much square footage can be lost. And then let's say it meets the criteria of having at least 50%. Okay. So as those walls slope down from the ceiling, once it hits 5 feet, right? Take a line that goes straight down plumb to the floor, and anything outside of that doesn't include a square footage. So you're going to lose square footage. Okay. Again, 50% of the room has to have 7 foot high ceilings or greater, or you do not count that square footage. Okay. If it meets that criteria, if at least 50% of your room has a ceiling height of 7 foot or greater, when that slope reaches 5 points or 5 feet, I'm sorry, when that slope comes down off your ceiling and it reaches 5 feet, take a plumb line straight down to the floor, and anything outside of that plumb line cannot be counted as livable square footage, regardless of what built-in features you might have there. I see a lot of people like to build in storage spaces, or they'll build in like dressers, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can't count it. What that means is lots and lots of homes here in Northeast Ohio are going to shrink, not physically, but by the way that appraisers are allowed to calculate the square footage. Okay, so here's another problem with this whole thing. Okay, and that's this. Appraisers have been appraising homes for a long time, and they've been recording square footage for a long time. What if comparable sales are measured differently? Square footages for properties in local MLS systems and assessor records may not have been derived using the ANSI standard for measuring and calculating square footage. I guarantee you they haven't. Guarantee you. I've never heard of this until very recently. I've sold 300 houses. I've never heard of this 7 foot rule until very recently. Okay. Not a single appraiser. Anyways, let me read that again. Square footages in local MLS systems and assessor records may not have been derived using the ANSI standard. I would venture to guess that's probably very true. Like above 90% of those square footages have not been derived using the ANSI square footage standards. Okay. The appraiser may not know what method was used to calculate the square footage shown in an MLS listings or in tax assessor data. Of course they don't. How would they, unless they appraised it themselves? Through research and their knowledge of the local market, appraisers determine if the square footage provided through alternate sources should be adjusted. So now they're just guessing. They're not going in the comps that they're looking at to base valuation on the subject property at hand. They're just going to guess. Oh, did they use ANSI standards or not? You know what? I think I need to apply ANSI standards. There's probably about 10% of the above ground recorded square footage that doesn't count. Like now they're going to make that judgment call in their appraisal report. How is that possible? How many deals are going to get screwed this way? Okay, let me read it again. Through research and their knowledge of the local market, appraisers determine if the square footage provided through alternate sources should be adjusted. The adjustment process does not change the requirement to report subject square footage using the ANSI standard, right? So now appraisers are forced to guess, and if they feel it's appropriate based on no direct knowledge, just their own guesswork, they can make adjustments and apply that. And sometimes it may be favorable and sometimes it might not. Agents, listen, I know I got a lot of agents who watch this. There's appraisers who watch this. I try to get appraisers on here 5 times. I've invited different appraisers onto this program, and they are a very shy lot, and none of them have wanted to come on. If there's appraisers who watch this show, and I know they're out there, and you want to come on and talk about these new changes, I would love to have you on this program. DM me, please reach out to me. I'd love to have you come on and talk about this stuff. It's very, very important. And a lot of people are going to end up very disappointed here over the next year. These new rule changes are taking effect now. By this time next year, everybody's going to be doing it. They're mandatory. The implementation period is from this September that just passed until September next year, I believe. And by the end of summer next year, everyone has to resort and use this new system. So these changes are coming and it's imminent, guys. All right, let's get into the statistics for sales in Lorain County last week. These stats always come from the local MLS here. I only look at Lorain County. It's a pretty good sample size for the Midwest. And it's pretty indicative of what's going on throughout the Midwest when it comes to home values and trends that we see in the marketplace. So let's get to it. All right. Again, in episode 109, there were 504 single families on the market this morning. I do not look at mobile homes and I do not look at multifamily. I'm only looking at single family homes and condominiums when I look at these statistics. So again, 504 units for sale. Inventory keeps going up, keeps going up. That's a good thing. That is going to provide stability. Now, I think the function of inventory going up is the converse of demand going down. Nevertheless, 95 homes were sold last week in Lorain County. The median square footage of the homes sold last week was 1,775 square feet. Median value was $267,000. Median square foot price, $179.51. This is the metric that we are tracking and looking at and watching to determine whether prices are going up. So we just passed through Q3 just ended. Next week, I will calculate Q3's averages and we'll take a look at how that median square foot value compares to what we've seen before. So the last one was $170.24. We'll see what it looks like next week. Median days on market for homes sold last week was 29. Once again, that is going out to market, advertising, showing, receiving offers, negotiating, coming under contract, and then getting through the inspection contingency as well as the financing contingency before that house comes off the market. It's still taking less than a month for all that to happen on average. So the interest rate on a 30-year conventional note this morning was 6.36%, staying down there in the low sixes. This is a pretty healthy mortgage rate, buyers. Could go up. Everybody wants it to go down, but it could go up just as easily as it could go down. And that's not a bad rate there, guys. Historically, it's almost 8% on average. The big boy was 2.55 million sold in Grafton. Let's take a look at that, Mama, because it's beautiful. So this is the mansion in Grafton that sat on 45.5 acres. That was the big sale last week. Again, a little over $2.5 million. Just goes to show too the value you can find in real estate in Northeast Ohio, because 45.5 acres, this monster of a home, sold for $2.5 million. Let's take a look at some of these images. All right, you see the property there. There's the big beautiful home with the pool. They got a nice pond with a fire pit pond side, big barn that's bigger than the home. I want to say the home was nearly 5,000 square feet. So the barn's gigantic. Okay. Let's take a look in here. Doing a little bit of homesteading. Nice backyard. Beautiful. Of course. Oh, don't do it to me, man. Let's do this. Let's get inside this house. Well, there's a look at the barn. Anyways, you can see the pictures of this home here. Beautiful. But of course, you should and would expect nothing less for $2.5 million, right? That's the show for this week, guys. Thanks for joining me. Again, I'd love to hear what you think about Max Miller's call for the National Guard coming into Cleveland. Bothers me. Nevertheless, hey, as always, take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. I love you, people. I'll see you next week.